So let's talk a bit about this ghost gun regulation, the 80% lower, the ghost gun kit ban that is now in effect. What has been the practical outcome of this so far? It just went into effect. How is the market reacting to it? How are gun builders reacting to it?
Well, it's been interesting. Back in April, the ATF, and I'll probably just call them the ATF now for short. Everybody knows what we're talking about. The ATF decided on what their final rule changes were going to be as regards to what is a gun. Essentially, that's the question that they're trying to answer. And obviously in courts, in different jurisdictions, both the federal level, state level, municipal level, people get into a lot of really odd semantic and pedantic sometimes debate over what is a firearm or what constitutes quote unquote assault weapon, what is quote unquote high capacity. Well, at the root of all of that really is which part is regulated or which parts are regulated by the ATF. And people will get into, again, a semantic debate over laws versus rules. Well, the law is written so that the ATF can regulate the firearms trade and in some ways private firearms ownership at the federal level. The way they do that, the interpretations of that law, the rules, if you will, they actually have some control over. Independent control without legislative action. Now, that's something that's being called into question now because of a recent court case at the Supreme Court level dealing with the APA, which is essentially a counterpart type regulatory agency under the executive branch making up rules. And the Supreme Court saying, no, you can't make those types of rules, quote unquote, without going through the legislature, without involving another branch of government. So that may affect the ATF.
So, yeah, there's certainly going to be, I think, further legal challenges to this rulemaking, although the ones that have come up thus far have not succeeded in blocking it. And so it has gone into effect. In the media generally, it's described as a ghost gun ban, which that's how the president wants it to be seen, I think.
Yeah.
But in
it's
in
really
practice,
not that. Yeah, it's not that at all. And what so let's get down to that's the kind of the 100,000 foot view. So these are changes to the rules about what makes a gun and what doesn't. Obviously, then that affects as a trickle down effect on what I can purchase through the mail without having to go through a federally licensed firearms dealer, right? That's probably the best way to look at this. So 6 months ago, you could buy a box. I'm going to use this brand. Polymer 80 is probably the most ubiquitous brand, and they're really to be credited with a lot of making private gun making more popular and more accessible for a lot of people over the last handful of years. So this brand, and there's other brands out there, but you would buy this box, and inside of this box, you would get what I'll refer to as a frame precursor. So in other words, something that you can make into a legal firearm. Now, this one has been made into a legal firearm. I don't have any raw precursors right now, but it's been drilled, and I've had the supports, the areas that block the installation of parts milled out. So we say drilled for the pins that secure the parts and milled so that the parts will actually go in. You can see I've put the front and rear rails, the metal parts, into this now firearm. This is legally a firearm now.
Right.
So the thing that comes with 6 months ago, when you bought that, you got this referred to as a jig. The frame precursor lives inside of that, and that tells you where to drill the holes. You can see it's marked there to tell you where to drill holes, and it shows you where you would relieve the rest of the plastic that's blocking or some of the plastic anyway, that's blocking the installation of parts. There's some other plastic on the inside that also blocks the installation of parts.
Right. And so the 80%, as people call them, lowers the 80% finished, or you need to complete another 20% of the work to actually make the part usable. That came with the jig to actually do that finishing work.
And the drill bits
and
the rails is what would come in that package. Again, let's say, 6 weeks ago, but let's go before the rule change just to make it a little bit more black and white. Now, the other thing you have to understand is that 80% is a made up term, right? That was a marketing term. Polymer 80 uses it, 80% Arms uses it. It goes back decades. The reality is what you had to do as the manufacturer was either go to market with something that you didn't believe was a firearm and be prepared to defend yourself legally if the ATF said, no, you're selling guns, or you could send a sample to the ATF and say, do you think this is a gun? And they would say, nope, we don't think that's a gun. Okay, cool. I'm going to sell it through the mail. No registration, no FFLs. No
Another term for them is paperweights.
Paperweights, wind chimes.
Because technically they're not guns.
Yeah, it's a frame precursor. Now what the ATF has said along the way, this goes back several years, they have occasionally stepped in and said, you can sell the piece of plastic, but not the plastic and the tools to complete it, or even the instructions to complete it. Right. Otherwise, we think you're making it too easy. So this imaginary 80% becomes easier if it all comes in one box. And they did that with a company or a product called SS80, which is a brand created by the Glock Store franchise of gun building kits. And they said, you can sell the part, but there's not enough work that has to be done. So you have to sell the jig and the rails separately. Right. And what they did with Polymer 80 was they said, okay, you can sell the jig and the rails and the drill bits and all that together. Yes, that's okay. But then a couple years ago, almost 2 years ago now, they went and gave them a cease and desist on selling what Polymer 80 called a buy, build, shoot kit. And what that kit did was it also included all of the slide, barrel, all the upper parts that get mated to, and these are different sizes for the people in the audience that are gunny. They realize this is a Glock 19 size, it's a 70 size. But they sold the parts all together in one box. So you got the lower parts kit, or the trigger, all the stuff that goes in here, and the slide and the barrel. You got it all in one box, and you were able to buy it, build it, and then go shoot it and unserialized gun. Well, I think I might have gotten one of the last few shipments out of Nevada in December of 2000, maybe late November of 2020. And then the ATF came in and said, nope, you can't do that anymore. We're not going to let you sell the buy, build, shoot kits because you're making it too easy. And a lot of people got very upset, but they didn't realize this had also been done to SS80 a couple years before because it wasn't as popular, and that company's never been even close to as large as an influential manufacturer as Polymer 80 is. So there's been some incrementalism in the ATF's approach to this. What they said in April was that as of August 24th, we hereby rescind any implied or explicit permission we've given you to sell something as a non-gun. And if you want to sell something as a non-gun, looking at you, Polymer 80, what we want you to do is submit the thing, the block, the paperweight, the wind chime, the precursor, any tools, any parts, the packaging, the instructions, and, believe it or not, the marketing materials that you're going to use in conjunction with selling this thing that you think isn't yet a gun. And of course, you think about that, that means I can't run, I would have to like plan out my Christmas sale marketing, right, to send that to the ATF. Otherwise, if I use any other marketing during the year or in the future after they say yes, they can always come back and say, no, we didn't approve that marketing. We didn't approve that post to social media. So it got really convoluted. And what I think has happened, and again, I don't have all the insider information, but what I believe has happened is universally across the board, all of the manufacturers of these gun kits have said, no, we're not going to play that game. We're not going to just even try to comply with that. What we're going to do is we're going to think about this for a long time. And so for 6 months, really nothing, or for 4.5 months, nothing happens. There's rumors about what's going to happen, but nobody's sure. So Thursday hits, last week, Thursday hits. One company that and I know a lot of people in the gun building space, it appears that one company went very public with the idea that they were going to start selling the Polymer 80 boxes with just the frame precursor and the insert rails. No instructions, no jig, and no drill bits. And they showed pictures of packaging, which clearly appears to be from Polymer 80 with a new kind of closed cell foam insert padding that goes in the box. Because in the traditional boxes, the jig sort of fills up all the space, right? So instead of just having this rattling around in there, there's now like a fitted foam that this fits into and that the rails fit into. And that's what you're buying for a slightly lower price than what was being sold. Well, that company, No Quarter Innovations, announced this on, I think, Wednesday night, the night before the rule went into effect, Tuesday or Wednesday night. Then on the 24th, they started selling them. They weren't shut down. They continued. The ATF didn't show up. They didn't get a cease and desist. They didn't get raided. The packages have gone out. People have received their packages now. And a few days later, Polymer 80 formally announced on their website that they were also going to be doing the same thing. almost to the point where a lot of people are wondering, well, did they say, hey, we'll pay your legal bills if this goes bad? You're a smaller fish. You try it. Well, no court innovations successfully launched that way after the rule change, and that's what Polymerate is doing. So what that essentially means is there's really very little practical effect of the rule changes. Now, there's other things that we can get into on the rule changes, but as far as private gun making goes, if that's the truth, if the ATF is not going to step in and say, no, Polymerate, you can't sell the precursor and the rails, there's really not going to be much effect at all.